Death Battle Season 7 is wrapped up, so now it's time for me to rank all the episodes in it. This is already going to be a long video, so I'm going to keep this intro brief. But it is worth saying that there are a bunch of episodes I've already talked about, either in their own solo review, or in my ranking of the first half of the season I did 6 or so months ago. So the segments for those episodes will be a lot shorter than the rest. Go watch those videos if you want more elaboration on what I think of them. Alright, let's start off at the bottom and work our way up.
It's not Marvel versus DC that's the issue. It's the overuse of Marvel and DC comics in general.
Dear God, what happened here? Okay, so there's a certain Marvel vs. DC episode I wasn't looking forward to this season at all, and I somehow liked it less than I expected. I didn't like Nightwing vs. Daredevil, which left me pessimistic on any future live-action fights they could do, and lo and behold, the next one is the exact same match, but now they have guns. And it was pretty good. Anyway, yeah, Batgirl vs. Spider-Gwen fucking sucks. What was it I said back in my ranking for the first half of the season, back when I used the cringe text-to-speech voice?
And I can't wait to see what the SFM team does for their next episode. With the right match, Snake vs. Sam might just have some real competition for the title of my favorite episode.
God, that did not age well at all. I will give it props that, for every joke in the analysis that didn't land, there were a good few more that did. And the editing for the entire episode is fucking spectacular. They're able to make these static comic panels come to life, and I'm living for it. The animation though, what the fuck happened? I wanted to believe the team that animated 2 of my favourite episodes ever back to back could salvage this idea that I hated conceptually, but this seemed rigged against the SFM team from the start. As much as I loved Kenobi vs. Kakashi and Ganondorf vs. Dracula, both suffer from really notable jank whenever more fast-paced movements are involved. But they're able to make up for it with great dialogue and using more supernatural abilities to make up the majority of the choreography. This entire episode was hand-to-hand, which does not play into their strengths at all. Ignoring all the weird-looking hand-to-hand combat, weird-looking running, weird-looking everything really, this fight portrays both characters as such absolute morons and none of their dialogue is funny. Oh, I'm holding this explosive device and I have a literal sixth sense that tells me I'm in danger. Instead of throwing it away, I'm gonna make a dumb quirky comment about it. Oh, she's slowly placing a weapon on me. Time to do nothing about it. Huh, she just turned invisible. I'm gonna wait a few seconds before I do anything and then just attack the same spot she was in before. I hate the dialogue leading up to Gwen's victory. Not only does it make the result super obvious, but it's not funny, clever, or even remotely memorable. Speaking of the death, I liked it at first. The kill move is pretty solid, but the face Batgirl makes is so hilariously awful that I cannot take it seriously. Actually, Batgirl doesn't look particularly great in the fight in general, but that's understandable. I didn't expect them to make a custom model to match Gwen's. That would have been a waste of resources. And to end on a positive note, I hear the model for Gwen is custom made, and if it is, they did a spectacular job. It looks really good. No wait, I'm not going to end on a positive note. What the fuck is this? The Batarang isn't even making contact with her wrist. What the actual fuck is this? I expected nothing from this episode, and I was still disappointed. I had a blast memeing on it when I first watched it in a call, but watching it on my own I was bored out of my mind for most of the fight. The analysis segments being enjoyable and well edited wasn't enough to save the episode for me.
Fire?
Okay, so there's an anime battle involving a fire user that just didn't really click with me at all, and ended up being a bit of a disappointment when I watched it. And that, of course, is Sanji vs. Rock Lee. Bet you expected Zuko vs. Todoroki, but my opinion of that episode has actually gotten generally more positive since my review of it. Sanji vs. Lee, though, only got worse on rewatches. I cannot remember the last time I was this expressionless watching an episode. Much like Batgirl vs. Spider-Gwen, I think the analysis has some pretty good jokes and some fantastic editing. Nick really is a godsend. Also, much like Batgirl vs. Spider-Gwen, the fight can get pretty janky at points, which is a shame since there's some pretty good choreography at points. Other than that though, I have a lot of issues with how the fight was written. Lee's face glows to indicate the curry's really spicy and then he complains about it being mild? What? And apparently it's really out of character for Lee to be a dick like this, so that's points off as well. Lee spends so much of the fight in the drunken state and I feel like it really fucks with the pacing of the fight after he sobers up. Apparently his thing is usually more of the lower gates as opposed to using the higher ones, but he goes through the gates so quickly. Between activating the 5th and 7th gate, there's like, what, 15 seconds? He transforms to 6th and 7th without Sanji ever really forcing his hand. Lee just kinda hits him once and thinks, fuck, I could be hitting him so much harder right now, hold on. Also, he only uses his signature move once and it gets no-sold. After he transforms into the 8th gate, he lands one hit and it completely obliterates Sanji's leg. And Sanji doesn't even give a shit apparently. No scream, not even an ow. Fucking dummy had more of a reaction to Boomstick punching him earlier in the fight and he doesn't even have a nervous system. Another big thing that bothered me was the dialogue in the fight. Every single line suffered from either being not well written, being delivered in a really weird way, or both. I'm really not into either of these voice performances. They sound off to me, even without hearing the original voices for these characters. And regardless, some of the deliveries just sound really bad. The worst case offender is,
since you wouldn't finish your food, I'm making you cough up whatever you've already eaten.
Sanji just sounds so bored despite having his entire fucking leg blown off. He almost has a cool line near the end.
Looks like mild suited you best.
Is a good line, but then he thought, oh, that sounded cool. It would probably be even cooler if I kept going. And that's exactly what he did, and it killed the line for me. I have given this episode significantly more time than I was planning on, and on a positive note, I guess. I really like the hand-drawn stuff. It looked mostly really good. Good job. Quite like the track as well. That's about it. Next episode.
I'm bored. You're boring me.
Shira vs. Wonder Woman has some amazing animation quality with pretty much no noticeable jank. Too bad it was wasted on an episode that bored me out of my fucking skull. There's very little that happens in this one that I can say really sticks out to me. I guess I liked how they used the invisible jet. I like Shira's onslaught on Wonder Woman's gauntlets syncing up to the music. This 14-second long shot is really well done, and there's the occasional really cool shot. But for the most part, this is just a whole load of nothing. These characters can move celestial bodies, and I'm supposed to be amazed at them cutting down trees like it's the Lumberjack World Championships, which I typed up as a joke, but apparently that's a real thing. The death is embarrassingly weak. You'd think with a sword that can slice atoms they'd use that aspect of it in the killing blow. But no, it's just a standard decapitation which was ripped off from the godlike Alucard vs. Spawn DBX. There isn't even any build up, it's just, oh, my gauntlets are broken, guess I'm gonna stomp you now. Speaking of which, despite me liking how it syncs up to the music, Shira being able to break the gauntlets at all completely broke my immersion in the fight. If she was strong enough to do that, then anytime they clashed swords during the fight, Shira should have just cleaved straight through Wonder Woman's sword and Wonder Woman herself and won instantly. The dialogue also causes me physical pain. None of it is funny, it all feels like it's trying so hard to be cool and quirky and it just puts me to sleep. Wonder Woman has the gall to say, "Get over yourself," when she brags more during the fight than Shira does. I said I was going to keep the segments for episodes I've already talked about brief, but I just ended up ranting about this episode again. Whoops. Long story short, I don't like it, but I don't hate it. 4 out of 10, the tweets making fun of the announcement post were unironically better.
Chopped up into 18 little pieces.
Yeah, my opinion on Zuko vs. Todoroki is somewhat more positive, but not a whole lot. This is the biggest disappointment of the season for me. All the pieces were there, the hand-drawn stuff is mostly stellar, the fire and ice effects are gorgeous, the voice acting is fantastic, and this is easily the episode I wanted most out of this entire season list. But the animation's just so janky. Every movement is awkward, it just feels so stiff and lifeless. None of the action is memorable, they don't play around with these powers nearly as much as they could have, and the setup is so unbelievably lame. Zuko accidentally shoots a stray fireball and that's grounds for Todoroki to murder him apparently. None of the banter in the fight works. No line stuck with me except for the unintentional repeat of Ben vs. Hal. And I hate that they didn't end it with Todoroki saying "that's rough buddy." Biggest wasted potential of the fight right there. Speaking of bad writing, the analysis does nothing for me. None of the jokes land, it's all super boring and predictable, especially the repetitive Boomstick's dad jokes. Also, I can't really vibe with Wiz seemingly being attracted to a 14-year-old, that's a bit cringe. Also, there are just no stats in the episode. They failed to convince me on the outcome of one of the most unanimously agreed upon episodes of the season. Good job. This episode just disappoints me in a way few other episodes have. It's not awful and it has plenty of great elements, but as a whole, I just couldn't get into this one. Zuko's end clip still absolutely sends me though. Does this one really count? I mean, I guess I'll still include it regardless, but I have no idea if this counts as part of the season list. Out of all the standalone reviews I've done for episodes this season, my review of the 7 Battle Royale is probably the one I disagree with the most now. It finally gave me incentive to watch the Amazon original series The Boys, which I very much appreciate. But ironically enough, watching the series made me like this episode less. My biggest disappointment here is how they use Homelander. Or rather, how they don't. Quite possibly my favourite aspect of The Boys is the overwhelming stage presence that Homelander has. How intimidating he can be while just talking normally, walking around the room and smiling. Homelander does nothing in the animation and only really steps in at the last second. I get that they didn't want to have him just stomp everyone, but at that point just don't include him. He was still declared the winner at the end, so what gives? I will say that this episode has a good few funny jokes, but the analysis and animation all blow through them super quickly. The animation is alright, but it feels really slow for the most part. Not many hits feel super impactful, and I cannot unsee how much this looks like a less stilted Darkly animation. The conclusion is really good, by far the most in-depth one of the season besides Hulk vs. Broly. And that bothers me. It doesn't go to Beerus vs. Galaxia or Sonic vs. Flash, something that would benefit from a longer explanation. It goes to an episode with an already canon order of elimination. I also like how Billy gets the laser baby despite them never mentioning it in the analysis, and also despite him only having it for a single scene in the entire show. This is an okay enough bonus episode, I guess. I wish the boys got a more interesting match though. I would have loved something like Homelander vs. Titan or Billy Butcher vs. Hero Killer Stain, but this was fine. You could have removed it from the season altogether, and the only thing I would have missed would be the constant making fun of the Deep. Also, if they say Amazon original series The Boys or mention the battle being a simulation again, I swear to God I am going to scream. Speaking of screaming, by the way,
Ragnarok?
Cronu vs. Venom sure did happen, unfortunately. Cronu had so many opponents to choose from, and they went with by far the most boring one. But the episode still ended up being alright. The voice acting was good, the custom stripes for Cronu and Ragnarok were fantastic, and I don't mind the jank as much here since it kinda fits Cronu. I don't know, this episode just really didn't click with me. There aren't a whole lot of standout moments in the fight. Venom had a few good lines, but the track never really picks up and the death is pretty lame. I liked the episode, I guess. I have next to nothing to say on it though. This is the kind of episode where the majority of things to say on it are dependent on being an active part of the Versus community in order to comment on the Venom research. But I definitely don't fall under that, so I'm just gonna move on.
Very nice!
I used to love Grey vs. Azdeath. Then I realised that what I loved was the track and not much else really. I have nothing to say on the analysis outside of Boomstick stripping being the worst thing I've ever seen, and I barely know the characters, so I don't care much about the research not being presented very well, or the characters not being in character during the animation. I don't even know if those things are true, that's just what I've been told, and I really cannot be bothered to check. But yeah, this episode's just kinda alright. I enjoyed it I guess, but not that much. There are some decent lines, some cool use of their ice powers, some pretty good sprite rigging at points, and some really great looking parts of the animation. My favourite easily being this brief sword fight right here. But there's also a lot of jank that takes me out of the fight a bit, some cringe dialogue at points, and the death is fucking pitiful. But it's all elevated by Lost Ice Storms. I don't care that it doesn't fit these characters very well, this shit slaps and it's one of the best things to come from Death Battle this year. What a banger. Yeah, nothing much to say here, moving on. Dany vs. Jake certainly had a lot going against it. The stuff in the animation preview was really bad. I'd probably call it the worst preview of the season. The analysis also had some real bad parts. I hate how they butcher the theme songs for both, but otherwise the analysis covered the characters pretty decently. And the animation got really good not long after the preview ended. Up until the death though, that kinda sucks. But between that is some really fast-paced and exciting action where both throw out a bunch of powers back and forth. It's unfortunately not helped by the track though, which stays really low-key for the entire fight and never really picks up. My least favourite thing about this episode though is how involved Butch Hartman got in it. I get that they probably didn't know about all the scummy stuff that he's done, which is why they let him on the cast in the first place, but it's really disappointing that this is the one time a character's creator has gotten publicly involved with a Death Battle episode. Butch is a less than agreeable person, to say the least.
Not gonna lie, Wiz.
Is Black Canary vs. Sindel good? Not particularly. But I still like it on account of it basically being the big meme episode of the season for me and my friends. Every single line of dialogue is such a spectacular failure that thinks it's so much cooler than it actually is, and it's the funniest shit ever to me. The death is comically bad, the Sindel sprites look less than great, and this is such a bland matchup. All of which me and my friends have memed to death. If one more person messages me with the
"Such a pretty bird with such an ugly song. Tell me, can you fly?"
line, I swear to God. I will say in regards to unironic positives that the animation quality is mostly pretty good. They managed to make a scream battle not annoying somehow, and the analysis was actually fairly good. I enjoyed the conclusion, and I think they explained the result pretty well. If you think this is a bland or even bad episode, then that's valid. I don't even disagree all that much. But this has been such an amazing source for shitty memes that I can't help but like it somewhat. But none of that matters now since Boomstick says the funny inside joke, so this is number one now.
I got a tank! People with tanks are never outnumbered!
Red vs. Blue is an episode that's been growing on me a bit over time. The analysis is still nothing special, the deaths all suck except for Lopez and Sheila, the voice acting for Griff and the blue team is still weird, and I'm still disappointed by the lack of banter and lack of notable jokes in general. But everything else about this episode slaps. I love the hand-to-hand segments, Sarge and Lopez are a joy to watch for the entire fight, Blood Gulch Bedlam is such a banger track, the animation is visually great, nothing I haven't said in my review of the episode back in November. If you want my more in-depth thoughts on this episode, then go check that video out. But I will address the one criticism of the episode that I'm not too sure about anymore. The scene where Griff hits Lopez is meant to subtly imply that Griff knows Lopez was aiming for Sarge due to him being smarter than he lets on. And that would have been great if they actually showed Lopez aiming at Sarge before Griff hit him. Seriously, just switch the shots of Lopez aiming from when Griff and Tucker attacked him and we're golden. Actually, even then, Lopez may hate the Reds, but he's the most competent person on the field. I don't think he's stupid enough to not realise that if he shot Sarge, he would then be the closest living Red to Tex, who would then tear him limb from limb. This scene is really minor though, so it isn't really significant enough to have a massive impact on my enjoyment of the episode, positively or negatively.
Done, huh? Oh, it hurts to laugh.
I am so upset that I like this episode. Cable vs. Booster Gold is a lot of fun. The personalities of the characters clash really well, Booster's voice actor's clearly having a field day, they use time travel better than Ben vs. Hal, and the death is unironically one of the best of not only the season, but the entire show. I'm dead serious. It's a really unique kill with some fantastic sound design and great last lines from both characters. The analysis is nothing special, but I do like how they call back to the 24 zeros bitches thing from Goku vs. Superman. And they almost got me to respect Booster Gold for half a second, that's an achievement right there. There are still some issues I have though. I'm not really big on Cable's voice being higher pitched than Booster's, I don't know how to feel about that. The T-Rex drawing looks really bad and clashes with everything else on screen in a way I really don't like. And Cable's thing in the analysis where he scales to the Silver Surfer but not actually is super dumb in the same way as Beast's golden tree feet. Though at least they acknowledge that here, unlike with Jotaro's diamond's teeth feet. Outside of the death, this episode doesn't do much particularly amazingly. It's just pretty fun in spite of the decidedly unfun match. Fuck you, Booster Gold.
Don't talk to me.
Jenos vs. War Machine is this season's Black Widow vs. Widowmaker, in the sense that I still really like it, even though everyone else thinks it's one of the most bland and boring episodes ever. And I guess I can see that. Maybe my hype for Jenos clouded my judgment, but I don't care. This episode is still a lot of fun for me. I have a full review that's mostly accurate to my current thoughts, so I guess watch that if you want a more in-depth look at my opinions on it. But I do like the episode a little less now than I did back then. Dany vs. Jake and Zuko vs. Todoroki are a big part of this. The hand-drawn style would have fit either of those fights so much better, but it got wasted on this. Taken on its own merits though, it's still a really good animation with a lot of moments that stuck with me, though some of those are because they're a bit cringe. Why does Jenos say he won't fall apart that easily despite Rhodey easily blowing him up 10 seconds ago? Why does Rhodey aim his cannon and then proceed to charge at Jenos? Why is the death so shithouse? But for every cringe moment like those, you have moments like the beam struggle, Jenos disabling Rhodey's flight, Rhodey slapping Jenos from the sky, and Jenos firing his rocket fist. There's a lot to like here, but I guess I can get why this is one of the least favourites of the season for most people. Also, why does Jenos never say incinerate during the fight? That's a bit cringe, bro.
There's a tier list of furries?
John Talbane vs Sabrewolf was on the verge of greatness. It was this close. Though, to be fair, for it to be good at all after that animation preview on the Death Battle cast was a welcome surprise to me. It started out really slow, the sound design was genuinely awful for the entire fight, and there are a bunch of weird scenes like this shot of the burning corpse and Sabrewolf trying to block the fire dragon with this guy's dead body for some reason. There's just so much holding this episode back for me being able to call it really great. But despite all that, I still really liked it. The analysis felt like a love letter to both series, which I really appreciate, and the fight also really picked up after the preview. I love the shot where they dig into the wall and fight at a 90-degree angle. I love how they incorporate Sabrewolf's bats into the fight. I love the summoning of the fire dragon, and I especially adore the scene where Sabrewolf strangles John with his own intestines. The fight is pretty much pitch perfect from that point on. It takes on a monochromatic colour palette, which I really like, with the only other colour on screen being the red of the blood and the moon. I love how the difference in the kinds of wolves they are is illustrated in the fight. John is at a disadvantage when the blood moon makes him act out of blind instinct, but then when he's able to regain his senses, he uses strategy to gain the upper hand and win. Yeah, he becomes more feral for the kill, but he had already won before that. The blood moon coming back was just to allow for a more brutal kill, and it certainly delivered. Easily one of the best deaths in Death Battle history. It's so damn good. To wrap this segment up, I'll cover the track, which everyone praises to no end. And while I still like it and I think it complements the fight well, it's not really my kind of thing that I'd go out of my way to listen to on its own.
And veritable versatility!
God, Miles vs. Static is so damn good. The puppet animation is fantastic and set a precedent that not a single other episode of the season lived up to. They adapt the Spider-Verse aesthetic to the fight amazingly in a way that Batgirl vs. Spider-Gwen didn't even attempt. The banter during the fight was pretty good too, and What's Up Danger is easily my favourite track of the season. And how can I not love the episode that gave us the absolute dumpling that is Professor Boomstickium? It's only really let down by a weak death, a boring match, and maybe using a little too much Spider-Verse footage. Yeah, great season premiere, that's about it. Still nowhere near Dante vs. Bayonetta though.
You're the monster for ruining my pizza!
Leonardo vs. Red Ranger is great. The animation is really well done, there's next to no jank, everything flows really well. It never drags, and I really like the dialogue, which sounds like it comes straight from a really old cartoon. Leonardo may have some dialogue that sounds more along the lines of something Michelangelo would say, but that doesn't bother me much, I guess. Only big issues I can say about this one is that it's disappointingly pretty short, and I'm not really into the setup. I don't know why Leo's just standing out in the open eating his pizza. That doesn't seem like something he'd do.
Got me again, Flash!
Sonic vs. Flash by a mile had the most wasted potential of any episode this season. They use a minuscule amount of both of their abilities, and those that they do use, they don't use to their fullest potential. The characters stop having banter after the animation shown in the preview, and the conclusion is way shorter than it should have been and doesn't sell me on the result at all. But much like Ben 10 vs. Green Lantern, in spite of my many issues, the best stuff in this episode is some of the best stuff in this season in general. The animation is really fast-paced and entertaining. I love the entire first minute of the fight and the banters the characters have with each other in it. The hand-drawn stuff is gorgeous, especially when Wally turns into Ghost Rider for some reason and delivers one of the best deaths of the season. There are a lot of jokes that work, the track's a banger, the pre-analysis covers the characters so well, it's a mostly stellar episode let down by a bunch of mostly minor issues that just kinda pile up for me. The biggest sin of this episode though is Sonic's last line. It's so cringe and I hate it. I don't care if the cringe was intentional, it's still not done in a comedic way. It's the same reason I don't give Mewtwo vs. Shadow a pass for its intentionally shitty voice acting. Also, I cannot express how thankful I am that there's no awful line about time travel. Thank God.
It's fucking Red Hood.
Oh my god, what a glow up from Nightwing vs. Daredevil. I never expected to like Winter Soldier vs. Red Hood at all, let alone love it this much. The irony of me saying, this is the only episode I'm not looking forward to, Only for it to be the best episode to come out after I said that, with the exception of the season finale, is not lost on me. Every issue I had with the live action fight in Nightwing vs Daredevil is gone this time, with the exception of the deaths still being really bad. It keeps the previous live action fights amazing choreography, but this time the hits actually feel impactful. It's shot so much better, it makes better use of its set piece. They use weapons in more interesting ways, it's so damn great. I love the scene where they just pause to take a breather, and I especially love the scene right after where Jason gets PTSD from Bucky kicking his ass with the crowbar. It's like the Genjutsu scene in ObiWan vs Kakashi, but not nearly as good. The costume design's also pretty good overall. Bucky's costume is mostly alright, and outside of that one cringe scene, I couldn't tell his arm was CGI. But they popped off with the costume for Red Hood. It looks fantastic and looks like something you'd see on an actual movie set. The helmet is the best part with its glowing eyes, it looks really cool. I will say I'm not a fan of the analysis segments. The editing is fantastic and it makes me so upset that they gave the best editing of the season to this and Batgirl vs Spider-Gwen. But there aren't any jokes I remember, the explanation for the winner's pretty bad, and I just generally got bored of it due to how sick I am of Marvel and DC on the show. Bucky's end clip also continues the trend of everyone getting awful end clips. It focuses more on Rocket for some reason, and I just lost my shit in call when I first saw it.
Show me.
There's a lot to say about Hulk vs Broly, both positive and negative. The preview for the fight had me really worried. I didn't like how the characters looked, the setup was cringe, and Hulk using fast and light attacks felt really weird. But god damn did that fight pick up after the preview. This fight has some fucking stellar scenes with some of the most beautiful looking shots in any death battle ever. The cosmic destruction is so damn good. The shot of them putting out all the stars in the galaxy is amazing. The reality-shattering headbutts is one of my favourite scenes in this entire season, and everyone I watched it with for the first time on Discord was popping off for it, on top of the reveal that Broly won. The voice acting is mostly really great. There are a few cringe lines here and there, but the deliveries are consistently really good. Hulk especially has some fantastic lines. Some of my favourites include,
Yes! Show me! Break the world! Break everything!
and
You are a monster? No! The devil!
I really love when they can work in the characters saying the other's iconic lines in cool ways, and this episode just does that fantastically. And the track, good god, the track is so fantastic. Ikari is such a banger, perfectly capturing the hype of the scale of this fight. Easily top 3 tracks of the season for me, and I plan to keep re-listening to it for the foreseeable future. But it is still beaten out by What's Up Danger for me, and also surprisingly Blood Gulch Bedlam. That track ended up being way better than I expected. There are a few more issues in the animation after the preview ends though. Broly does kinda dominate most of the fight, Hulk dying off screen is a little lame, and I'm really disappointed we didn't have a moment where Broly felt bad about killing him. That was one of my main hopes for this episode. I have so much more to say about this episode, I've barely scratched the surface, and I'd love to do so in a later video. But I don't want this segment to drag on for too long, so I'll move things forward for now.
Forearms!
Machamp featuring Goro is a ton of fun. From start to finish, it's a high-intensity fight that never slows down and has plenty of fantastic standout moments, like the seismic toss and the constant back and forth near the end. It's really funny too, and ends with a fantastic death. Even though this matchup in general isn't great, it makes me happy to see a Pokemon being used that isn't a starter, legendary, or otherwise one of the most popular. The connections for the match do kinda work against it though. The reason this is happening is because they both have 4 arms, yet that's rarely taken advantage of. It's cool when they do, but there could have been more of it. Other than that, my only issues with the fight are Goro's character model, which is balanced out by Machamp's being amazing, so I don't mind that much. And that it kinda feels like Goro never gets the spotlight. It always seems more focused on Machamp, hence why calling the episode Machamp featuring Goro is something that's caught on with me and my friends. Those are pretty minor issues for an otherwise fantastic episode though. I rewatched this one over and over, it's so much fun. The double dab isn't fun though. I didn't like that scene very much.
I am the impossible!
Beerus vs Galaxia brought the season back from its mid-season break with a bang. It set such a huge precedent for what was to come, and given how it's number 2 on this list, I'm sure you can guess how that went. I can excuse the rare bits of janky puppet animation and jokes that don't land, because this is such a ton of fun. The majority of the jokes land, especially from Beerus, whose performance by River Canoff may be my favourite of the season. Everything from
Don't you dare
to
That was for my ice cream.
to the contrast in how they both react to being sent to the alien planets is absolute gold. The poking battle at the start is great, the ending is really climactic, and the death is fantastic. I watched this for the first time in a Discord call with my friends, and we all absolutely popped off it.
I am the impossible!
I adore this episode so damn much. I already have a review up if you want my more in-depth thoughts on it. I guess it is a little disappointing that nothing else after the season break was even able to come remotely close to this, but the same isn't true for the entire season. There is still one more episode to go.
Hello there.
Yeah, ObiWan vs Kakashi still takes the top spot for me, and it isn't even close. I adore almost everything about this episode. It has one of my favourite analysis segments. The fight is mostly fantastic, the voice acting works, the track is an absolute banger, there really isn't much I can say about it that I didn't say back in the summer. The Genjutsu scene is still easily the best part of the entire season in my eyes, even in spite of the now decently steep competition. I love that they're able to implement prequel memes in a way that doesn't feel forced. They're set in situations that feel natural for ObiWan in the animation, and most of the ones in the analysis come from Boomstick, which feels in character. I only have a few minor issues with the fight. There's like one or two scenes with jank that I don't like, one line that I don't think's delivered really well, and I don't get why ObiWan goes on the offensive when they specify in his analysis that he's better at more defensive lightsaber combat. Also, the death doesn't really hold on the one-stroke duel nearly long enough to create a good amount of suspense. Yeah, no, that's about it in terms of what I don't like. I didn't really have much to say about this episode that I haven't said already. So, was Season 7 good? Yeah, I'd say it was an overall good season. Then again, there isn't really a season of the show I'd call bad overall, not even Season 3. But this honestly is the weakest the season has been for me since Season 3. For every banger that we got, it feels like we got 2 more that are aggressively mediocre. Out of these 21 episodes, only the top 10 on this list were able to get a 7 out of 10 or above for me. Everything below Jenos vs War Machine, for me at least, peaks at a 6 out of 10. And don't get me wrong, a 6 out of 10 is still good in my eyes, but compare this to Season 6 that hit us with bangers left and right, with me giving over half of the episodes there an 8 out of 10 or higher. On top of that, they had a far more exciting season list. There was some Marvel and DC overuse at the start, but they were able to find their footing in the middle and deliver on some of my favourite matches they've ever done, with only one episode in the entire season that I didn't really like. Season 7 also had by far the worst season list. There's so much Marvel and DC and barely any interesting matches. When the same 2 series take up almost half of your entire season list, then you're doing something wrong. We only had 6 new series introduced this season, which is honestly just sad. Yeah, this season was overall better than Season 3 by quite a bit, but at least Season 3 had mostly really good and interesting matchups that were a mix of unique ideas and long-time requests. So while I do still like most of Season 7, it does feel like a step down from the last 3 that came before it. But I'm remaining optimistic for Season 8. With Luis at the helm directing the fight scenes, I'm confident we're going to get some real standout animations that are among the best the show has ever done. I look forward to seeing what Season 8 has in store, and I look forward to reviewing those episodes when they come out.